Hey, SpeakEasy Podcast listeners, this is your host, Altovise. Oh, man, can we be honest? I'm a snacker. Hi, my name is Altovise, and I'm a snacker. Hi, Altovise.
Hello.
Yeah. And COVID didn't help any, guys. I could purposely be inside and we weren't allowed to go outside. Oh, I'm getting extra snacks just because nobody's going to see me. But we have had some real interesting health challenges that have come up within the last year. And man, it's taking us to a whole other mindset when we think about health being our wealth and, what that looks like, uh, legacy building, what that means, and really being able to say, am I really fit for service? Am I at my best to be able to do whatever it is I want to do in life or in business? So with that being said, I'm excited about having my guest on for today. Hello, Lisa. How are you?
I am well, Altovise. How are you?
I am doing great. I am feeling good.
Feeling free?
Uh, Man, this has been an interesting scenario. People have gone from their pants fitting to them not fitting. We've gone through this whole transition of trying to figure out, should we get the vaccine? Should we not? Are masks really helping us or hurting us? And so I know we have some great topics to discuss today. Lisa, let the studio audience know a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive in.
Okay, great. First of all, thank you again for having me here this evening. My name is Lisa, and I am a nurse. I've been a nurse, registered nurse for 35 years. Most of my practice has been in the emergency department and addiction medicine. So I think I can definitely speak to some of these challenges. And I love looking at things from a variety of different perspectives, not necessarily just from the scientific allopathic Western medicine perspective, but also with a natural health, wellness, holistic perspective as well. And so, yes, this whole COVID-19 issue has been quite unique. I'll say that, and we'll start with that as a place that we can agree.
Start there, right?
Start there.
Just like as a whole, it's been unique.
Right.
It's interesting that you said that because I'm sitting here and as I look over, I see the hand sanitizer and I think about this rush to buy hand sanitizer. Now, what I have is a homemade one. It's with the alcohol and the aloe because I'm all about trying to do things a little healthier.
Right.
But it was interesting because it made us realize, guys, we really aren't doing what we like, the basic things like washing our hands.
Well, and the really interesting thing, I've taught nursing school for the last 3 years. And one of the fabulous things I love teaching is about immunity. And when you're teaching about how the body works in our immune system, the very first level of defense are these fabulous little microorganisms on our skin that actually act as our first line of defense to protect us against foreign invaders. So that was my first warning sign when we started telling everybody, wash your hands with this really intense hand sanitizer. And people, of course, instead of using that as a backup in case they could not wash their hands properly with soap and water, everybody goes to the hand sanitizer thinking that's best. Well, if you could recall back, I want to say it's 5-10 years ago, there was a huge antibacterial soap and washing issue that folks had gotten involved with. And the powers that be decided that, maybe we don't need to be doing quite that much because there are good microorganisms on our skin that help to protect us against viruses and against bacteria. So we have to watch how we do things, that we don't go too far in one direction and kill the good guys with the bad guys.
Oh, you know what that made me think of? And this is a sidebar. It made me think of, remember how, nose hairs and men started trimming their nose hairs?
Yes.
But they didn't really understand that, no, your nose hairs are like keeping things out of your nose and out of your body.
Yeah, they're little microfilters. And the same thing with our cilia in our lungs, which is why they keep things out. And then, of course, when you smoke a lot, that makes those cilia, those little hairs, lay flat, and they don't like stand up straight so that they can do their filtering and push things back out. So, you know, I'm still of the opinion that God made us in such a fashion that if left to our own devices with some sort of a bit of a healthy perspective, that pretty much our bodies are pretty remarkable and they are resilient. The problem that I have seen with this whole situation with COVID-19 has been the fear piece of it. And that being triggered, that in and of itself triggers the release of cortisol, which when you talk about weight coming on and staying on, that is the result of the cortisol in addition to any extra calories you may be bringing on. So the cortisol changes the way you metabolize things, and it makes it very difficult for the weight to go off. So your body is saying, oh, we're in this terrible, stressful time. I'm going to need to hold on to extra body mass so that in case I am without food or without anything for a while, I will be able to survive. So it's a survival mechanism, but a lot of times people don't realize that it's, you know, neurochemically based, and that fear is part of why we have a hard time then losing, you know, the weight that we may have put on with our adventure with COVID.
Oh, most definitely. And a lot of people, when it comes to scenarios that we're not familiar with, that immediately the fear just shoots up.
Right. And that is, to me, that's one of the things that got me on the mindset that I've been on for about 5 years, is that we can't be fighting against fear, or we can't be constantly fighting against things all the time. We are meant to coexist. We are meant to live and trust and love and be and all of those things. And how can we say that on the one hand and then be so frightened at something that is basically not even alive? A virus is not even alive until it actually gets into the body, into the cells, and starts replicating. So that's a huge piece that, you know, when you start digging into the science, it really gets fascinating. But the issue with fear is that makes, which I'm sure you're aware of this, that makes your immune system suppressed. And so there's nothing to benefit us to improve our health if we're looking at things through a fearful lens. If, however, we say, oh, wow, this is pretty challenging, but gosh, we've gotten through these sorts of things before. Think SARS, think H1N1, think, you know, whatever we've gone through before. How did we handle it before? What did we do to take care of ourselves? And, you know, the people who were the most fragile, we always sheltered them. We kept them safe. And then we allowed the healthier people to, you know, fight the infection naturally, and to then create a herd immunity, waiting until, you know, a certain level of herd immunity until a vaccine would be available if and when it was. So it's been fascinating, I'll have to say.
And that leads to the next topic of discussion, because everybody right now, we just talked about fear and stress and what that does to our body. And everybody right now are in this fear and stress battle when it comes to the vaccine.
Right.
There are those who are saying, no, just everybody needs to get it. There's other people that are saying for valid reasons, no, we don't need to get it. Let's see what it does first. Because when we think about vaccinations, it actually takes a long time for them to approve a vaccination. So the short period of time that, you know, these vaccinations have, you know, been out and have gotten this approval don't really line up.
Well, and that's the one thing that is somewhat misunderstood, because these are still under emergency use authorization, abbreviation, emergency use, EUA. So they have actually not been officially approved by the FDA. So we are in essence still undergoing phase 3 trials, which is why they have not been, quote, approved. Now, yes, they're okay to be used, but with this special caveat under the use authorization, they've not been officially, quote, through that whole long years and years of evaluation to get that stamp of, quote, approval.
Right. So that's like been one of the things that have kind of like spurred this whole debate of to get it versus not to get it. We know that at the time of this recording, they just approved it for a younger generation, for our teens to get it. Nobody under 12 just yet, but 12 to 15, they just approved, and they're working on it.
Think about that just for a moment. How many children have actually died as a result of COVID?
I'm not sure.
It's actually the numbers that because I did look it up. It was like 400 and something. So the number, whereas, if one of those children was your child, that's tragic. There's no doubt, but it's still a very teeny, tiny, tiny, tiny number and percentage wise versus the overall population. So the youth have been they're very resilient. They're, to this point, have been very hardy against the disease. And I've not seen the comorbidities involved with the children who have died, but I might suggest that they most likely had diabetes, obesity, other health challenges that they died with COVID, perhaps not as a immediate first-line cause of COVID. So if I had a child that was that age, I would say you have to look at the risk-benefit ratio. If your risk of dying from something is 0.0000 whatever percent, do you want to then introduce into your body, well-intentioned or not? I mean, it is apparently well-intentioned, these vaccines, but we still don't know. These are actually phase 3 trials. They've not really been tested on many children. So these are just fair questions to ask. And yes, I know that the American Pediatric Association has backed this, but I'll be bold and say something and say, is there any motivation behind these large organizations to make these recommendations? Is there, are there donations that are being exchanged? And I'm not saying that there are or there aren't, but I think these are fair questions to ask, especially when the data is not 100% out there yet. And I love having this discussion because I think it's critical that we have dialogue about this so that we can have good questions and then fair answers where people can talk on both sides and not be made to feel less than or, called names or anything like that. I think that would be not a good thing. So I think it's really important. And then at the end of the day, you have to weigh everything in your unique situation and then be confident with your decision. And I would never, when somebody's made their decision, I support them because that beating people up one way or the other after they've made a decision is counterproductive, and that's just not fair. So I think that we just need to have open communication. I think that's the critical point. That's through all of this.
Lisa, I just want to hug you right now.
Oh, okay, good. Yes, I'll hug you back.
Because that has been such an interesting viewpoint and vantage point because of the conversations that are coming out when it comes to the vaccination. A large population, which is the African-American population, are nervous about it because of things that have happened in the past when it comes to vaccinations. And so we're looking at our children and going, do I want to give my child this? Is this, it's almost like deja vu, depending on what generation you're in.
Well, and if you get that gut feeling that this does not feel right, please go with that. I 100% of the time believe that when you get, any of us get that feeling, that there's a reason, and don't try to talk yourself out of that. So I just read something in addition to the African-American population. My question is what percentage of the folks that were initially tested during the initial trials were African-American or Hispanic, of different ethnicities? Because what I'm hearing in India is quite distressing. They had been sort of keeping things on an even keel for the longest time. All of a sudden they get these vaccines and more people are dying from COVID.
Yes.
And my immediate question, and I'm a Facebook poster that basically says, hey guys, what percent of the people that were initially tested through phase 2 were Hindu or Indian? Because that physiology, that genetic predisposition is going to be very unique, especially when it's in India, not necessarily mixed with genetic material in the US, correct? I mean, that's a very different, different scenario. And they used medications and therapies that were quite effective earlier. And again, if it's not totally broken, do we really need to fix it? And is higher tech always going to be better? And quite honestly, I like low tech, and I like the simplest, and strengthening our immune system, taking quercetin, which is very much similar to hydrochloroquine. If you started getting ill, I mean, it helps get the zinc into the cells, just like the hydrochloroquine does. So, I mean, there's just interesting physiology, interesting biochemistry that can help people make an informed, more, quote, do no harm kind of process, because so much is still up in the air.
And I love, I want to hit on this last topic before we close out for today, because another big thing that came up in the midst of COVID, in the midst of the pandemic, was, of course, the whole idea of, what can I use to fend this off or to make myself stronger? And then, of course, the whole big thing came up about the bleach. And we know that people take things a bit far on social media, but
yes, they do.
We understand, still their concern with, saying that this, this is what, could potentially help. But when we go back, there were times where we were talking about vitamin C being something that was really good. We talked about some of the other all natural aspects to what could really be, great for us,
right,
to not only give ourselves some protection against this, but against whatever else may come.
That's the big thing. And quite honestly, as a healthcare provider and a nurse for many, many decades, when we're not sure about what we're up against, my response is to say, hey, we are still taking this all in. In the meantime, let's do those fabulous things that we all know to do to boost our immune system. What they have found with especially this particular situation is vitamin D. D3 is critical. And somewhere north of, I think, 85% of patients who actually were critically ill in the hospital with COVID had very low vitamin D levels. The fabulous thing about vitamin D is that it helps so many other things as well. So if you're not taking vitamin D on a regular basis, definitely do that, because it helps stabilize moods. It helps with so many different metabolic processes in our bodies. And it's almost as though it's a linchpin. And if that's missing, many of the other things don't work well. Vitamin C, I love vitamin C. I still will take a whole gram on a regular basis, on a daily basis. If I'm not feeling well, I'll go ahead and take 1 gram, 1,000 milligrams with each meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The fabulous thing with vitamin C is it's water soluble. So you don't have to worry about ever taking too much, because you'll just basically pee it out. Vitamin D, on the other hand, is fat soluble. It stays with you a bit. So you don't want to overtake too much of that. Zinc is great. Zinc is important in the cells, and with zinc being active in the cells and inside the cell, it helps to prevent the replication or the basic multiplication of the virus if it gets in your body. So you want the zinc, and you want quercetin, which is another supplement. But I mean, these are all things that I envision, had we known about them early on and been, instead of saying, boop, 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 be afraid, say, be not afraid. As we're getting more information, wash your hands, do all the things that you did as a kindergarten person, as a good human, and,
Right.
and, you know, take care of yourself, boost your immune system. So not even boost, support your immune system, get sleep. If you're feeling sad or tired, talk to somebody, get a hug others, you know what I mean, in your families and such. So there are just so many fabulous things that we can do to nurture and to reinforce our well-being and our holistic health, then that helps so much more than just being afraid to turn around or to breathe or to talk or to, yeah.
I love it. SpeakEasy Podcast listeners, I know this episode was slightly different than some of the others, but I wanted to make sure that you guys were well informed. One of the things when we think about business is that my health is my wealth. If I'm unhealthy, then I cannot be 100% in my business. I cannot be 100% for my spouse. I cannot be 100% for my children. I cannot even be 100% for me. And a lot of people found that during this whole pandemic was that it was the basic things. It was the foundational pieces that if they were in place, then we may not have had such a big shift as we did, or had such a big of a pandemic that we had, because those key things were not there. Are you walking every day? Are you drinking water? And, you know, Lisa talked about it. Are you getting rest? Can we be honest? Many of you, although we were in a pandemic and we're not able to go outside, you had less rest.
Right. And I think the most important thing is turn off the devices. I mean, that if you just think of your mental health and your well-being as your bank account, you can either be filling it up with good stuff, or you can be draining it with all the negativity. And just even for periods of time through the day, I can speak for myself. I feel 5,000% better if I put the phone down, turn it off, go outside and dig in the garden. Come back in, then I can be refreshed and deal with it. So do those simple things for yourselves and really listen to your body. If you're feeling out of sorts, put it down. Don't need to dig any more into the craziness, and then do something good for yourself, like Altovise said.
Yes. Shout out to everybody that started having plants during the pandemic. Right before I think we went into the pandemic, I had an aloe plant, and it's just been growing, and it sparks joy every time I look at it, and it makes me want to get another plant. But then I'm like, I don't want to kill a plant.
Now stay positive. So the plants know your energy. So if you're like, oh, I'm afraid I'm going to hurt you, it picks up on that. So go ahead and say, you know, I've been successful with aloe. I can try another plant. And then you've got your aloe there in case you get a burn, because that's the beautiful healing salve for, for burns.
I love it. It's growing and it's getting bigger and bigger.
Wonderful.
And so shout out to all of you that have also started walking more. There are some people, and I'll even say this, you know, there have been people who have said, you know what, I want to go back to play. So we see more people jumping rope. We see more people roller skating. And I'm like, yes, I'm here for it. Go. Have fun.
That's fabulous. That is, you know, and that is something we need to do definitely as adults, but even, and our kids, I think, have forgotten what that kind of play is really like, because they've been plunked in front of the television with video games and stuff so much. And granted, there's a time and a place for all of it, but the play piece is just, we take ourselves back in our memories to when we were children and we didn't have complicated lives, and it was just carefree and joyous. And what a beautiful place to remember.
Exactly, exactly. SpeakEasy Podcast listeners, this has been an episode that has been especially for you. Without you, there would be no podcast. So I want to hear your feedback. If you learned some things in here, or if you're somebody that started having a plant or going and roller skating or something along that lines, we definitely want to hear from you. Leave us a review on your favorite podcasting platform or reach out on Instagram at Altovise Unmuted. Also, Lisa, let them know how they can reach out to you and, you know, where they can find you at online as well.
Okay, great. The easiest way to reach me is via my website, which is www.nursesempoweringhealth.com. And that's, we can talk, you can book a 30-minute discussion with me. We can talk about where you're at, where you'd like to be, and we can find a way to get you there in a painless kind of fashion.
Most definitely. So guys, this is going to be one for the books. I love it. I have all the feel goods of it. With that being said, I am your host, Altovise Pelzer. And until next time, guys, don't forget to press it out. See ya.